The story opens on a cold, moonlit night. A lonely pine tree clings to the side of a jagged cliff, setting a desolate stage for what's about to happen. High atop that peak, two figures stand in the shadows. The air is thick with tension as one man looms over another who's clearly seen better days. On the ground is Jin Soan, battered and bleeding. He's clutching a wound, barely hanging on as he looks up at the man who used to be his leader. Standing over him is Jung Soe, a lord of the Murim alliance. He offers a cold thanks to Jin, acknowledging that thanks to his help, all the alliance's records have finally been restored. Jung Soe is a tall, elegant figure in ornate white robes, his face partially hidden by a black mask. One crimson eye glows with a ruthless light as he looks down at his former subordinate. Jin can only look down in bitter silence. He spent his whole life being a perfect tool, memorizing and restoring everything just because he was told to. He looks up, his face stained with blood and resentment. He asks if this pathetic, dog-like death is really how they plan to repay all his hard work. Jung Soe slowly draws his sword. He points out that Jin's memory is too good. He knows every top-grade secret in the alliance, which makes him a massive liability. He levels the blade at Jin's throat. He claims that for the justice of the martial world and the safety of the alliance, Jin and his memories need to disappear. Jin can't help but let out a cynical laugh. The idea of these traitors talking about a great cause is almost too much for him to handle. He mocks the Murim alliance, pointing out the absolute absurdity of their danger. To him, they're nothing but cowards hiding behind big words. Struggling to even stay upright, Jin reminds his executioner that the alliance has already lost. They've been crushed by the demonic cult and are barely managing to stay alive. He finds it hilarious that they're worried about further danger when they're already at rock bottom. His gaze is sharp, even as his life fades. Jung Soe doesn't flinch. He stubbornly insists that the alliance will defeat the demonic cult and restore their honor once again. Jin throws it back in his face, reminding him how they ran away to the North Sea. They didn't win, they just used countless innocent people as meat shields to buy themselves time. He's actually looking forward to seeing how they fail this time. He wants to see exactly how Jung Soe plans to uphold his pathetic cause. Looking up at the moon, Jin admits he can't even tell the difference between the righteous alliance and the evil cult anymore. To him, they're both just as filthy. The masked lord's eye narrows. Jin's final regret is that he ever entrusted his fate, and the future of his sect, to hands as tainted as these. Instead of waiting for the sword to fall, Jin makes a final choice. He steps back, away from the blade and toward the edge of the abyss. His bloody hand reaches out one last time. He decides he'll be the one to bring about his own end, rather than giving Jung Soe the satisfaction. As he tumbles into the darkness, he reflects on his life. Because he remembered everything, every single detail was just a fresh layer of hell for him. He falls fast, leaving the cliff and his betrayer far behind. He's finally free from the burden of his perfect memory, or so he thinks. We flash back to the start of the war between the Alliance and the demonic cult. Flags wave over a landscape of constant conflict. The power balance was heavily skewed. The cult was terrifyingly strong, while the Alliance was weak and disorganized. Jin and his fellow disciples were drafted into the chaos. They were used as fodder, simple shields to let the Alliance officials escape with their lives. During their retreat, the Alliance came to him with a deal. They wanted him to memorize every single record they had. They used his disciples' lives as leverage. If he could memorize and restore everything at their base, they promised to pull his people off the front lines. So he did it. He memorized everything like his life depended on it, because it literally did. But things didn't go as planned. He realizes now that he made the wrong choice. He shouldn't have spent those years rot in an archive while his friends were dying. He should have been out on the battlefield. At the very least, he could have given his life to help just one more person escape. He curses the crappy ability heaven gave him. He wanted inner energy, something useful, not just a brain that never forgets a single tragedy. As he lies dying, his regret is absolute. But then, a teal bracelet on his wrist begins to glow with a strange, pulsing light. An explosion of energy erupts from the artifact. His last wish is clear: he should have become strong enough to protect his people himself. No more begging, no more being a tool. He wanted the strength to be the shield himself. Suddenly, everything changes. The cold cliff vanishes, replaced by a bright sky and the roof of a traditional training hall. The world feels warm and alive again. A wooden sword pokes him right in the head. Someone's standing over him, taunting him for being such a pathetic loser. A hand grips the handle of a practice sword. Jin's mind is racing, still caught between his death and this strange new reality. He's lying face down on the ground. He thinks his cursed memory is just playing tricks on him, making him relive some old, painful moment. He lets out a yell as the sharp pain in his head registers. It's too vivid, too real to just be a dying hallucination. It freaking hurts. He looks up, dazed, and sees a group of students watching. A bully with a top knot and a wooden sword is smirking down at him. This is Guy Cheol-young. Jin is frozen in shock. He looks younger, and the environment is exactly as he remembers it from decades ago. He can't believe his eyes. He realizes he's standing in the middle of the Taeyul sex training ground. He's somehow traveled back in time to the days before everything went to hell. Jumpio and Hong are completely bewildered. They've never seen their senior act like this before, and honestly, they don't know whether to be worried or just confused. Jin Soon's face is flushed with pure emotion. Tears well up in his eyes as he looks at the friends he thought were gone forever, his heart racing with a mix of relief and disbelief. He takes a sudden, heavy step forward. His movements are purposeful and intense, cutting through the confusion of the training ground. Without a word, he pulls them both into a tight, desperate hug. He doesn't care how weird it looks to the other students, he's just overwhelmed to find them alive and breathing. Hong is totally weirded out, calling it gross and trying to pull away. Jin can't help but flash back to the last time he saw her, lifeless and cold on a battlefield. Jumpio asks if something's wrong, completely clueless as always. Behind his innocent face, Jin sees the horrific memory of him being impaled during their original timeline. The younger disciples are whispering and pointing in the background. They're all convinced that their senior has finally snapped and lost his mind. Jin realizes that even if this is just a final hallucination before death, his perfect memory is making it feel incredibly vivid. He's determined to cherish every second of it. He gives them a soft, tearful smile. For the first time in what feels like centuries, a genuine spark of warmth and happiness returns to his chest. In a lighter moment, chibi versions of Hong and Jumpio wonder what on earth could be wrong with him. They have absolutely no idea what kind of hell he's been through. He pokes Hong's cheek, teasing her like he used to. He realizes he even misses the way she used to nag him about every little thing during their training. He stretches Jumpio's cheek, recalling how much the kid's bedwetting used to drive him crazy. Now, he'd wash 1,000 blankets just to have his junior back in one piece. The mood shifts instantly as a wooden sword enters the frame. Guy Cheol-yang is sick of being ignored and is ready to ruin the moment. Guy points his weapon right at Jin's face with a sneer. He threatens to beat the other disciples if Jin doesn't stop acting crazy and face him in a duel. Jin's expression immediately goes cold. He finds it insulting that of all the people his memory could show him right now, it had to be this arrogant prick. Guy Cheol-yang smirks, fully aware of his family's massive influence. He's the precious young master of the Jiryong Trading Company, and he acts like he owns the whole sect. He's used to relying on his father's money to get away with everything, including beating his fellow disciples half to death during these duels. Jin finally reaches for his own wooden sword, his grip firm. If this guy wants a fight so badly, he's more than happy to give him exactly what he asked for. He stands tall, a dangerous, predatory grin spreading across his face. He decides to use this chance to get some very satisfying payback from the past. Guy grits his teeth, looking absolutely feral. He isn't used to anyone looking back at him with that kind of cold, unshakable confidence. Guy lunges forward with a furious scream, swinging his sword with all his strength. To him, this is just another chance to humiliate the sex loser. Jin's eye remains perfectly calm, tracking every micro-movement. In his experienced mind, Guy's pro technique is moving as slow as a turtle. Guy uses the Samyang sword art, a style his family privately bought for him from a wandering master. He thinks it makes him invincible. It's a vicious, wild style that emphasizes momentum and raw aggression over actual discipline. It's perfect for someone with zero real skill. The techniques are rough and unpredictable, designed to overwhelm an opponent with sheer violence rather than finesse. Jin remembers it perfectly from his previous life. He knows this art specifically targets the eyes to blind and disable opponents early on. He sidesteps the blow with effortless grace, leaving the other disciples staring in absolute shock. He didn't even have to break a sweat to dodge. In his mind, this is just child's play. Compared to the literal monsters he's fought in the demonic cult, Guy is just a kid waving a stick around. Guy is completely stunned that he missed. He can't believe a trash student like Jin was able to read his movements so perfectly. Jin's thoughts drift back to those endless, soul-crushing nights in the Murim archive, where he was forced to memorize thousands of forbidden techniques. His eyes glow with a faint, eerie blue light. He has an entire library of lethal, high-level moves stored in his brain, waiting to be used. He accesses the Sokian sword art, a style that should be physically impossible for someone of his current rank to even know. As Guy charges again with blind rage, Jin prepares his counterstrike. The air around him seems to sharpen as he settles into a perfect stance. With a focused, piercing glare, he readies his attack. He's not just planning to win, he's planning to humiliate this bully in front of everyone. He executes a flawless basic form of the Sokian sword art. It's a move of incredible speed and surgical precision that catches everyone off guard. The wooden sword connects with a sickening crack against Guy's jaw. His head snaps back as blood sprays from his mouth, his arrogance vanishing in an instant. Jin lets out a low, dark chuckle. Seeing this untouchable bully finally get put in his place feels better than he ever could have imagined. He looks down at his hand, a twisted, satisfied smile on his face. This is the first time in 2 lifetimes that he's felt this kind of pure, unadulterated power. Another brutal hit lands square on Guy's forehead, sending him reeling. The impact is massive and leaves no room for a comeback. The entire training ground goes dead silent as the young master is sent sprawling across the floor. No one can believe what they just witnessed. After taking those 2 hits head-on, the young master stands frozen, gasping for air. He's never been humiliated like this before, especially not by someone he considered absolute trash. Hong and Jumpio are paralyzed with fear and awe. They're happy he won, but they know the Jyaorong Trading Company will be out for blood after this. Guy Cheolyang's face is a mess of blood and fury as he lets out a guttural scream of agony, the shock of his defeat finally setting in. Despite the blood streaming down his forehead, the young master of the Guy family continues to charge at Jin So-on like a moth to a flame, screaming frantic threats about taking responsibility for the humiliation he's suffered. But as he just managed to crawl a single step forward, with one last pathetic thud, Guy Cheolyang collapsed face-first into the dirt, completely unconscious. Jin So-on stood over him with a blank expression, looking oddly detached from his own victory. Hong watches the scene with a mix of disbelief and growing dread, her hands clenched as she takes in the sight of the sect's main benefactor's son defeated. The younger disciples erupt into cheers, surrounding Jin and praising his unexpected strength. They're thrilled to see their tormentor finally humbled and don't care about the consequences yet. Jin's expression remains unreadable, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth hinting at a hidden, dark satisfaction. He looks down at the unconscious Guy, convinced this is just a final, vivid hallucination before his actual death. He feels a strange sense of peace, having settled a lifelong grudge in what he thinks are his last moments. His peaceful reflection is shattered as a fist connects squarely with his jaw. The impact is sudden, shockingly forceful, and far too real to be part of a dream. Hong is fuming, her face red with anger as she screams at Jin for his recklessness. She doesn't share the younger student's sense of triumph and sees only the trouble ahead. She reminds him of the harsh reality Guy's family provides the sect's funding. If the Jyaorong Trading Company cuts them off, everyone in the Taeyul sect will be left starving. Jin is stunned, not by her words, but by the sharp, stinging sensation in his jaw. He wonders why a dying hallucination would feel so physically painful. He clutches his bruised cheek, the throbbing pain cutting through his mental fog. Hong continues to rail against him, her voice filled with panic about their already dwindling food supplies. A sudden realization begins to dawn on him as he stares blankly at the ground. The detail, the noise, and especially the pain are far too consistent for a dream. Amidst Hong's incessant shouting and the worried looks of the other students, Jean finally speaks. He realizes this isn't a life flash or a dying vision at all. Hong's anger only deepens at his strange behavior, her shadow looming over him as she reaches her breaking point. She delivers another punishing blow to his head, shouting at him to stop talking nonsense. The force of the strike sends Jean reeling backward toward the floor. Jean falls back, his world spinning as the physical reality of his situation finally sinks in. The cold stone of the training ground feels undeniably solid. He lies flat on his back, a comedic soul escaping his mouth as he blacks out. As his friends panic around him, the truth finally hits him: he hasn't died, he has truly gone back to the past. Rows of medicine drawers line the wall of the quiet infirmary. Jean So-eun lies on a bed with a thick bandage on his cheek, looking like he's seen much better days. His eyes are dazed as he tries to piece together his memories. He eventually sits up, realizing that a single slap from his junior sister was actually enough to knock him out cold. He takes a moment to process the fact that he's actually back in his younger body. His mind wanders back to where the nightmare began, the second coming of the demonic cult. It was a war that nearly wiped out the Murim alliance and pushed his own Taeyul sect to the very edge of destruction. He remembers the piles of bodies and the smell of blood. In the middle of all that chaos, Jean was treated like a tool because of his perfect memory. While others fought, he was stuck at a desk under a mountain of books. He was ordered to memorize and restore every single manual the Alliance owned, working until his body started failing him. He was the archive, not a warrior. He didn't complain, pushing through the exhaustion and the blood to engrave every word into his mind. He wanted to be useful, but he didn't realize how dangerous that knowledge was. Loyalty meant nothing to the people in power. Young Soe stood over him as he lay dying, ready to discard the tool that knew too much. As he coughed up blood, Jean realized his memory had become a liability to the Alliance. He begged for his juniors to be saved, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. He thought death was the end, but he opened his eyes and saw the training grounds of his youth. The transition was so sudden it felt like a hallucination. Everything he had ever memorized was still there, clear as day. With a library of forbidden techniques in his head, he realized he wasn't just a victim anymore. He had already used those future memories to humiliate Gai Cheol-yan, a bully he could never even hope to beat in his previous life. The look on the guy's face was priceless. Back in the infirmary, Jean scratches his head, still trying to make sense of the fact that he's actually regressed. It all feels too real to be a dream. He looks down at the blue dragon bracelet on his wrist, a powerful artifact he took from a demonic cult leader years into the future. It's the only thing that came back with him. This thing was a spoil of war from one of the few battles the Alliance actually won against the demonic cult. He remembers the blood on the ground as he claimed it. He remembers it glowing with a strange, pulsing light right as he took his final breath on that cliff. It was a blinding radiance in his final moments. He wonders if this bracelet is the key to his return, but his thoughts are derailed by a man screaming for him outside the infirmary. The peaceful moment is definitely over. Jean sits up immediately, recognizing the obnoxious voice of someone who clearly thinks they own the entire mountain. Outside, a pompous man is berating the sect leader, demanding to see the brat who dared to hurt his precious son. He's making a massive scene in the courtyard. Jean listens from the door as the man threatens to cut off the sect's funding starting this month. He's using his wealth as a weapon. The sect leader's silhouette is visible through the paper door, her voice sounding small and desperate as she tries to apologize for the mess. She starts begging for forgiveness, promising to discipline Jean severely if the merchant will just overlook the incident this once. It's a painful sight. Jean realizes this man is Gai Yeonseok, the father of the bully he just beat. The guy is fuming, his shadow looming over the door like a monster. He continues to insult Jean, calling him a lowly bumpkin, and mocks the entire Taeyul sect for being in such a pitiful state. He's really enjoying his power trip. Jean watches through the gap, seeing the sect leader bowing her head in submission just to keep the school from going bankrupt. She looks defeated. The sight of her cowering brings back flashes of the piles of bodies from his past life. He's seen this kind of helplessness before. He remembers lying in the dirt himself, a man who died with nothing but regret because he lacked the power to stand up for himself. He was just a tool back then, a weakling who couldn't protect anyone he cared about. He refused to let that happen again. His jaw tightens as he bites down on a piece of wood until it snaps, the sharp crack mirroring his inner resolve. He's done being a victim. Jean stands up and stretches out his new body, feeling the strength returning to his limbs. He's ready to move. He looks at a cloth-wrapped token, his mind already spinning with a way to turn the tables on the arrogant merchant. A plan is forming. Jean prepares to step out, his eyes turning cold and sharp. If they want a show, he's more than happy to give them one they'll never forget. Outside, the sect leader keeps thanking Guy Yeonseok for his generosity, even as the man scoffs and looks down on her. It's a pathetic display of greed. Yeonseok turns to leave, thinking he's successfully intimidated everyone into submission. He looks satisfied with his bullying. He has no idea that Jean is currently watching him from the roof, perched right above his head like a predator. Jean drops down with a mock polite bow, greeting the distinguished guest with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He introduces himself as the bumpkin the man was looking for. He stands tall on the roof ledge, looking down at the shocked sect leader and the furious merchant. The atmosphere shifts instantly. Yeonseok's face turns purple as he realizes he's looking at the boy who beat his son. He immediately starts screaming insults again. Jean just sighs and looks away, completely unfazed by the man's sputtering rage. He points out that there's barely any age difference between them. The merchant stared at him in stunned silence, shocked by the boy's sudden outburst. Jin So-won also suddenly realized that he had let his tongue slip. After all, in this current timeline, his body was still just that of a young teenager. Jin clasps his hands together and mocks the man, asking if he's planning to follow his son around like a bodyguard even after he enters the academy. He's effectively silenced the merchant's threats. Guy Yeonseok is screaming at the top of his lungs, his face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief. He's accusing Jin So-won of using dirty tricks during the spar to specifically target his son's head. The merchant guild master keeps ranting, claiming his precious son doesn't even need a place as pathetic as the Taeyul sect. According to him, the disciples here are just servants meant to wait on his son until he enters the academy. Jin just stands there looking completely bored, leaning his head on his hand as if he's listening to a dull lecture. He dryly reminds the man that Guy Cheol-yan was the one who beat up over 10 juniors so badly they couldn't even get out of bed. Leaning in with a cold stare, Jin mocks the idea of someone trying to enter the Murim Academy with such embarrassing skills. He doesn't hold back, calling the merchant's son a loser for being beaten by a bumpkin from a third-rate sect. He looks Guy Yeonseok right in the eye and tells him that his grand plan for his son's future is nothing more than a delusional dream. He's essentially laughing in the face of the most powerful man in the room. Guy Yeonseok is absolutely losing it, veins popping on his forehead as he trembles with rage. One of his servants desperately tries to hold him back, begging him to restrain himself before he does something he'll regret. Jin remains unfazed even as the merchant grabs his collar and screams directly into his face. He calmly asks if Guy Yeonseok is truly prepared to take responsibility for what happens if he keeps acting this arrogant. He repeats the word slowly, emphasizing that the merchant's wealth won't protect him from the consequences of his own pride. Jin's gaze is steady, almost predatory. Guy Yeonseok just bursts out laughing, clearly thinking he has all the leverage because of his money. He sneers at the Taeyul sect, calling it a third-rate school that's on the verge of total collapse without his support. He laughs in Jin's face, boasting that he can take his business and sponsorship to any other sect he wants. He thinks he's holding the sect's life in his hands. From behind, Jin watches as the man continues his threats, claiming the sect will be begging for their next meal if he decided to walk away. He's trying to crush their spirit. The reality is that the Taeyul sect is still officially one of the 108 peaks, the elite inner circle of the Murim Alliance. But in their current, weakened state, most people wonder how they managed to keep that status. Being part of the 108 Peaks comes with a massive privilege, special admission. This allows a sect to recommend one disciple directly to the Murim Academy without them ever having to take the exam. It's a literal golden ticket, bypassing the regular, brutal testing process that thousands of other hopeful martial artists have to go through. It's the only reason someone like Gai Cheol-yang would even be here. Gai Cheol-yang's family guild isn't part of that elite group, so they paid a fortune in sponsorship fees just to buy his way into the sect. He's effectively a pay-to-win disciple. The other disciples look on with worried expressions, knowing their school's survival currently depends on this one entitled bully. Jin So-un, however, looks like he's already planned 3 steps ahead. Facing the merchant's threats head-on, Jin doesn't blink and tells him to go ahead and try cutting the funding. He's calling the man's bluff in front of everyone. He lets out a cold laugh and pats Gai Yeonseok on the shoulder, telling him he'll take full responsibility for whatever happens next. The merchant is visibly stunned by the boy's audacity. Suddenly, Jin's grip on the merchant's arm turns vice-like, his expression shifting into something much darker. He points out that the special admission evaluation is less than a year away. With a manic, terrifying grin, Jin asks why the guild master would settle for this sect if his son was truly as talented as he claims. Surely, you weren't rejected by all of them, were you? Gai Yeonseok is sweating now, his face a mask of shock as he realizes this kid just exposed his family's biggest secret. The boy isn't just strong, he knows things he shouldn't. In his past life, the sect was so desperate for money that they bent over backwards to accommodate every demand the merchant guild made. They were practically slaves to their sponsorship. Trembling with indignation, the merchant asks if Jin even knows who he's talking to, but he can't hide the fear in his eyes. The power dynamic has completely flipped. Back then, they did exactly what the guild wanted and secured that special admission spot for Gai Cheol-yang, hoping it would save them. It was a deal with the devil. Gai Yeonseok tries to regain control, screaming at them to wake up and realize they have no other allies. He claims his guild is the only thing keeping the Taeyul sect from total extinction. Jin leans in so close they're practically touching noses, reminding the man of the cold reality of the previous timeline. He's not intimidated by the man shouting at all. He flips the script entirely, telling Gai Yeonseok that it's actually the Taeyul sect that is saving the merchant guild from total social ruin. Without them, his son has nowhere to go. In his past life, despite all their groveling, the merchant guild cut them off anyway once they got what they wanted. Jin So-un knew the merchant's words were nothing but empty promises. Jin has seen this play out before and knows exactly where it leads. His eyes are hard, focused on a future where he isn't anyone's tool. He watches the merchant walk away, realizing that begging for help from people like that is a complete waste of time. True security only comes from one thing. Gai Yeonseok looks stunned into silence as he prepares to leave, his arrogance completely shattered by a teenager. Jin knows he needs real power to protect himself and his sect. The merchant guild master shouts one last insult as he storms off, but Jin isn't even listening anymore. He's already focused on his next objective. He has a lot to do, and his first step is figuring out how to regain the legendary strength he had before his regression. The clock is ticking. He stops for a second, his expression turning blank as he realizes he hasn't actually thought of the specific how yet. Even a genius can have a brain fart. As the sun sets over the mountains, Jin finds himself at the entrance of a hidden location he remembers from his past life. The air here is cold and heavy. The mouth of the cave is dark and covered in thick, glistening spider webs that shouldn't be there. Something dangerous is definitely nesting inside. He stands in the center of the cavern, surrounded by webs, focused on his simple goal of growing stronger as fast as possible. He doesn't have years to train conventionally. He knows that relying on the current, inefficient arts of his sect will never be enough to reach the top. He needs a shortcut that only he knows about. His target is the 10,000-year fire ginseng, a legendary elixir that can grant a massive, permanent boost to inner chi. It's exactly what his young body needs. He pulls out a mental copy of the Book of Jianghu Elixirs, a classified manual he memorized during his time as the Murim Alliance's archive. It's the most valuable thing in his head right now. The book contains the exact location and timing for every rare herb in the world, and thanks to his total recall, he remembers every single detail perfectly. He knows exactly when it will bloom. But there's a huge problem: the guardian of the ginseng is a massive, multi-eyed human-faced spider. It's much more horrific in person than any of the books ever described. Jean stares down the massive beast, mentally steeling himself. He knows that securing the 10,000-year fire ginseng is his top priority, as it's the only way to quickly fix his current physical limitations. He lunges forward with a shout, drawing his sword and preparing to use the Sokian sword arts of his sect. He's determined to end this fight in a single, decisive strike before the creature can react. Then, with a comical shrug, Jean suddenly stops and abandons the idea of a direct confrontation. He admits to himself that his current inner chi and sword skills are way too weak for a fair fight, and there's no point in wasting energy on a suicide mission. Instead of a sword, Jean grabs a thick wooden branch and sets the end of it ablaze. The orange flames flicker and dance as he prepares to use a much more efficient method to deal with the monster. With a devious smirk, Jean reflects on everything he's learned from the countless books he's memorized over 2 lifetimes. He's realized that in a life-or-death struggle, traditional swordsmanship and the martial Tao are completely irrelevant. The cave erupts into a sea of fire as the highly flammable spider webs ignite, trapping the human-faced spider in a literal inferno. Jean watches from the center of the chaos, unmoved by the heat. A close-up of the spider's grotesque, human-like face shows its multiple eyes wide with terror and pain as the fire consumes it. It never stood a chance against someone who already knew its greatest weakness. Jean stands tall amidst the roaring flames, his silhouette framed by the burning webs. In this new life, he's decided that winning is the only thing that truly matters, no matter how dirty the tactics might be. He clenches his fist tightly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He remembers his past life and whispers a quiet thank you to the very organization that eventually led to his death. His expression turns into one of pure, unrestrained malice as he laughs at the Murim Alliance bastards. He's using the very knowledge they hoarded to build a power base that will one day destroy them. The pages of the Book of Jianghu Elixirs detail the specific properties of both the 10,000-year fire ginseng and its guardian. It's the ultimate cheat sheet for a regressor like Jean. The text explains that the fire ginseng is found in dark caves and is famous for drastically enhancing bone structure and inner chi. It's the perfect foundation for any martial artist. The final note in the book reveals the spider's fatal flaw: its webs are incredibly flammable. The only way for someone with weak martial arts to kill it is to wait until it's feeding and then launch a sudden ambush with fire. A heavy blade plunges deep into the head of the human-faced spider, finally ending its life. Green blood splatters against the cave wall as the creature lets out one last screech. The massive monster collapses into a heap of shriveled legs and dark ichor. The fight is over, but the atmosphere remains heavy. Jean Soan stands alone in the dimly lit cave, the massive corpse at his feet. Despite the win, he doesn't look satisfied. He looks at his hands, muttering to himself that this just isn't enough. The power he's gained so far won't be nearly sufficient for what's coming. His frustration boils over, and he let out a desperate scream that echoes through the empty cavern. Sweat and grime cover his face as the pressure of his second life starts to weigh on him. Even after consuming the essence of such a valuable monster, the inner chi he received is barely a drop in the bucket. His body just can't absorb enough to make a real difference. He realizes his sect's mind arts are seriously flawed, or maybe he's just hitting a wall with his own talent. He stares at the tiny spark of chi in his palm, feeling the gap between his current self and a true master. Exhausted and defeated, he slumps against the rough cave floor. The silence of the cave only makes his thoughts louder. At this rate, he knows he'll never reach the level he needs. Time is ticking, and he's still miles away from his goal. If he doesn't get stronger fast, he won't be able to save the Taeyul sect when the chaos finally begins. He can't let history repeat itself. Visions of the future war flash through his mind, a brutal slaughter where the weak are treated as nothing more than expendable shields. He remembers the faces of those he lost in his first life. He's determined to make sure his fellow disciples don't die meaningless deaths this time around. To do that, he has to become a core member of the Murim Alliance before the war even starts. Getting into the Murim Academy within the next year is his first real hurdle. But standing in this cave, the path forward looks almost impossible. His fingers dig into the stone wall, leaving deep gouges in the rock as he grinds his teeth. The physical pain is nothing compared to the fear of failure. He shouts out in a moment of pure desperation, fearing that nothing will actually change. He's stuck in a loop of weakness he can't seem to break. Water drips slowly from the ceiling stalactites, the rhythmic sound echoing through the cold silence. It's a reminder of how slowly his progress is moving. He forces himself to calm down and think he needs more inner chi, and he needs it now. An ordinary training method won't cut it. That's when a specific memory clicks. Guy Yeonsiak had a legendary Manhwa elixir. It was the snow plum pill, and it was supposed to be his ticket to power. In his mind, he sees Guy Yeonsiak's father laughing while presenting the pill. The merchant had spent a ridiculous fortune to buy it for his son. But just before Guy Cheolyang could take it, the snow plum pill vanished without a trace. It was a scandal that never got solved. He closes his eyes, banking on the fact that no thief is perfect. Since the theft hasn't happened yet in this timeline, he still has a chance to change the outcome. He's confident he can track the culprits down using everything he's ever read. Humans always leave traces, no matter how careful they are. He activates his total recall, stepping into a mental landscape filled with endless rows of glowing bookshelves. This is his mind palace, where every piece of information he's ever seen is stored. He starts scanning the records, specifically looking for the Murim Alliance monthly reports from the Hefei branch. He needs to find out who was in the area during the original theft. Red energy trails guide him through the massive library, acting like a search engine for his brain. He flies past irrelevant memories, focused entirely on his goal. He moves with surgical precision, weaving through the stacks of mental data. Every turn takes him closer to the truth buried in the Alliance's archives. He pulls a massive tome from the shelf, certain the answer is hidden within these pages. The search is narrowing down to a handful of individuals. He cross-references mission reports and entry logs, tracking the movements of suspected criminals. The pieces are finally starting to fit together. Every single record he's ever memorized is laid out right in front of him, glowing with a red hue. It's a massive amount of data, but his mind handles it with ease. He gathers the scattered pieces of information to finally deduce the answer. The names of the thieves are becoming clear. 3 names appear on wooden identification tags: Zhu Jiangmak, known as the soul-chasing guest, and the corrupt Yensung swordsman, Gu Ilmu and Zhang Hang. These are the ones who took the pill. He slams the record shut, finally having a clear target in his sights. He knows exactly where they will be and when they will have the elixir. He brings his hands together in a prayer-like gesture, realizing his walking library status is actually going to pay off. Knowledge really is power. A dark smirk crosses his face as he thanks the thieves for doing all the hard work for him. He's not just going to stop them, he's going to take the prize for himself. Suddenly, the blue dragon bracelet on his wrist starts to pulse with a bright teal light. It catches him off guard mid-thought. He looks down, genuinely confused by the sudden reaction from the ancient artifact. It hasn't done anything like this since he regressed. The glow intensifies, huming with a strange energy that vibrates through his entire arm. He can feel the power radiating from the jade. Wisps of teal energy start to leak out, swirling around his arm like living smoke. He has no idea what the bracelet is trying to do. The tendrils lash out toward the dead spider corpse, wrapping around its remains like predatory tentacles. It's a bizarre and terrifying sight. The energy focuses on a glowing red sphere, the inner core of the human-faced spider. The bracelet seems to be hunting for the monster's concentrated essence. It's like the artifact is reaching out with a mind of its own, bypassing Jin Soan's control entirely. The core begins to pulse in response to the teal energy. He watches in total shock as the blue dragon bracelet begins to forcibly absorb the spider's inner core. The dark energy is being purified and pulled directly into the artifact. Light spills into the cave entrance, startling a pair of birds into the open sky as the echoes of battle finally begin to fade.
It's a sharp contrast to the damp darkness of the cavern behind them.
Inside, Jin Soan is enveloped in a swirling storm of red and teal energy. The spiders remain scattered across the floor around him. The air hums with the sheer force of the core's power being absorbed. Sweat pours down his face as he grits his teeth, his wide eyes reflecting the raw, unrefined power currently flooding his system. The intensity is almost more than his young body can handle. He stares at his palms as they crackle with a vibrant teal light, humming with a frequency that feels both ancient and overwhelming. It's a physical manifestation of the purified energy surging through his veins. The shock on his face turns into a manic laugh. This isn't just a simple power-up, it's a total game-changer for his current state. He can feel the bottlenecks in his cultivation literally shattering. He flashes back to his past life, remembering the day he claimed the blue dragon bracelet as a trophy from a fallen demonic cult leader. It was a victory bought with the blood of his comrades, and he kept it to honor their sacrifice. Back in the present, he stands firm on the cold cave floor, feeling the energy settle into his core and anchor him. The weight of his previous life feels a little lighter now that he has the means to fight back. He clenches his fist, and the teal lightning intensifies, wrapping around his forearm like a living creature of light. The sheer density of the chi is unlike anything he's felt in this young body before. With a sharp exhale, he throws a punch that releases a massive shockwave, instantly shattering the rock walls of the cavern. Dust and debris fly everywhere as the force of the blow echoes through the mountain. As the dust clears, he realizes the purified energy is blending perfectly with his Taeyul mind arts, bypassing years of hard training in a single moment. It's the perfect synergy between a righteous technique and a demonic treasure. Standing in the dark, he watches a small orb of blue light glow at his waist and knows that heaven hasn't abandoned him after all. He finally has a path to the strength he needs to protect his people. Far from the cold cave, the Taeyul sect is alive with the warm glow of lanterns for a festive banquet. The air is filled with the smell of rich food and the sound of laughter. Wealthy guests flood the courtyard, showering Guild Master Guy with praise while whispering about how money can buy even the rarest of elixirs. They are all here to witness the celebration of his son's guaranteed future. Guy Yeonsiak is in his element, loudly boasting about the legendary snow plum pill his father secured from the Manhwa sect. He makes sure everyone knows exactly how much it cost to pull those strings. He lets out a smug laugh, fully convinced that his father's wealth has already guaranteed his success at the academy. To him, martial arts is just another thing that can be bought and sold. Sitting on a stone ledge nearby, Hong Sarian looks completely unimpressed, her mind preoccupied with much more serious matters. She's the only daughter of the sect leader, and she can see the decay in the room. She stares into the distance, her expression turning somber as the sounds of the party fade into the background for her. Her eyes are filled with a mix of frustration and genuine concern. Memories of Guy Yeonsiak getting beat down by Jin Soan flash through her head, a reminder of the trouble that started all of this. She knows that family won't let such a public humiliation go unpunished. She remembers the look on Guild Master Guy's face and worries about what kind of retaliation Jin might be facing right now. The silence from his side is what scares her the most. She sighs and mutters to herself, calling Jin a complete idiot for leaving her behind to deal with all this political drama. It's her way of masking how much she's actually worried about him. A young disciple snaps her out of it, running up and shouting for his favorite senior sister to join the fun. The kid's energy is a sharp contrast to her heavy mood. Another boy follows with a plate of steaming food, determined to get her to crack a smile. They clearly look up to her as a big sister figure in the sect. The kids crowd around her, offering up the best treats from the banquet and demanding she take a bite. Their innocent excitement is hard to ignore, even for her. In the background, Guy Yeonsiak stalks off with a scowl, clearly annoyed that he's no longer the center of attention. He can't stand seeing the disciples ignore him for someone else. Hong Sarian finally lets out a genuine laugh, telling the kids to hurry and eat before they starve themselves. She's glad to have a moment of normalcy away from the merchant's boasting. One of the girls stops and gives her a knowing look, asking if she was getting all moody because she missed Jin. The sudden question caught her completely off guard. Her face turns beet red as she explodes in embarrassment, yelling at them to mind their own business. Her reaction only confirms what the kids already suspected.
The kids just laugh it off, holding up a plate of meat they plan to save specifically for Jean because it's his absolute favorite. They're convinced he'll be back soon to join them.
Her anger vanishes in an instant, replaced by a soft, quiet smile as she sees how much the younger ones still care for him. It's a bittersweet reminder of the bond they all share. She starts stuffing her face with food to cover her emotions, while the kids continue to tease her with cheeky grins. She tries to act tough, but she's clearly moved. She jokingly threatens to finish every last scrap herself if they don't start eating right this second. The kids take the threats seriously and prepare for a feeding frenzy. The boys let out a shout and start shoveling food into their mouths, their faces puffed out with rice and meat. It's a messy, joyful scene that briefly clears the heavy atmosphere. She watches them with a warm laugh, but as the moment passes, her eyes drift back to the empty space where Jean should be. The worry hasn't left her, it's just been pushed to the side for a moment. As the sun dips below the horizon, she lets out one last frustrated yell into the wind, calling Jean a massive idiot for making her worry. Her voice carries over the sect walls and into the twilight. Night falls completely, and the sky is dotted with stars above the glowing lanterns of the sect. The banquet shows no signs of slowing down, even as the hour grows late. Back at the main hall, Guildmaster Guy raises a cup to the crowd, basking in his own self-importance as the banquet continues.
He's clearly enjoying every second of the attention.
Yeonseok is right there beside him, clinking cups with a friend and looking entirely too smug.
He truly believes he's already achieved the greatness he's celebrating.
A dancer twirls gracefully across the floor, her long silk sleeves flowing in the air as the music picks up.
The celebration is at its peak, and everyone is lost in the revelry.
While the party rages on, someone is moving across the rooftops with terrifying speed, their feet barely making a sound on the tiles. They are a shadow in the night, unnoticed by the drunken guests below. The dark figure leaps from one building to the next, a master of stealth moving through the moonlight.
Their goal is far more important than any banquet.
He clears a massive gap with ease, his body low and lean as he navigates the dangerous heights. Every movement is deliberate and silent, the hallmark of a professional. He lands silently and pulls up his mask, a low, triumphant chuckle escaping him. This is Ju Jangmok, the thief who just stole the legendary pill right from under everyone's noses. Ju Jangmok stands in a moonlit clearing, clutching the stolen chest with a wide, arrogant grin.
He laughs at the ease of his theft, mocking the Jiryang Merchant Guild's supposedly impenetrable security.
He unlatches the ornate box to gaze upon the snow plum pill, which glows with a soft, ethereal pink light. The high-grade elixir is exactly as the rumors described, pulsating with a concentrated essence of inner chi. Focused entirely on his prize, the thief fails to notice a silent figure crouched in the shadows of the nearby trees. Jin Soan, hidden behind a mask, watches the celebration with a cold and calculating gaze. Ju Jangmok continues to boast to himself, certain that this pill will provide the energy required to master the heaven-piercing divine palm. He is already imagining his rise to the top of the martial world. Satisfied with his loot, he decides to make a quick exit before any pursuers can catch up to him. But his plans are cut short as a sudden, lethal presence fills the air directly behind him. A brilliant white sword strike flashes through the darkness, decapitating the thief in a single, brutal stroke. As his headless corpse collapses into the grass, Guilmu lands nearby, his long robes fluttering in the night breeze. A hand reaches down to pick up the red box from the blood-stained grass, its owner offering a mock apology for the interruption. The voice is calm and predatory, cutting through the silence of the woods. A figure in a dark mask steps forward, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light as he lays claim to the elixir. He makes it clear that he has his own desperate need for the legendary snow plum pill. The scene shifts to a dusty hunter's shop, where heavy iron bear traps lie in wait, their jagged teeth sharp enough to crush bone. Hefei's finest hunter supply shop was a quiet place, decorated with the pelts of beasts that had met their end in these very traps. Behind the counter, the shopkeeper stood ready for business. The shopkeeper looked up, his eyes narrowing as he sized up the new customer. Something about the young man's presence felt out of place in a shop for common hunters. Jin Soan walked into the shop with purpose, his shadow stretching across the wooden floorboards. He didn't look like he was here for simple rabbit snares or basic camping gear. He leaned against the counter, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He casually asked if the shop sold man-catching traps, as if he were ordering a simple meal. The shopkeeper's eyes widened in surprise at the unusual request. The casual way Jin So-eun spoke sent a chill through the small room. Recovering his composure, the owner boasted about his wide selection of hunting gear. He claimed to have everything from tiny rabbit snares to traps that could take down mountain-sized bears, everything except items meant for humans. Jin So-eun didn't flinch, slamming a heavy bag of gold onto the counter. He demanded traps strong enough to catch tigers or bears, dismissing any concerns about ruining the pelts. Looking down at the cold, sharp edge of a trap, he saw his own reflection in the metal. He specified that he needed something powerful enough to take a limb clean off at the slightest touch. He laughed, his eyes glinting with a mischievous, almost manic energy. He asked if there was something even better, something that could kill in a single hit. The shopkeeper broke into a cold sweat, his long-honed intuition screaming at him. He knew he probably shouldn't be selling these tools to someone with that look in their eyes. Back in the present, the forest is dead silent. The assassin remains standing over Chu Jong-mok's corpse, savoring the fruits of his labor. Gu Ilmo wiped a splash of blood from his cheek, a smug grin on his face. He had expected the thief to put up more of a fight, given his reputation in the martial world. He held the ornate red box with a triumphant look, finally claiming the prize they had killed for. The 5 swords of Din Song weren't above a little murder if it meant securing a legendary elixir. A sudden rustle of leaves caught their attention as a boot stepped firmly onto the forest floor. They weren't as alone as they thought. Jang Hang laughed, praising his senior brother for the easy victory. They congratulated themselves, certain that their status as righteous swordsmen would keep them above any suspicion. Gu Ilmu didn't waste time, suggesting they dispose of the body immediately. They needed to make it look like the thief had simply vanished into thin air without a trace. Before leaving, Jang Hang was eager to see the contents of the box. He suggested they verify the snow plum pill right then and there. They popped the lid, and a brilliant, radiant glow burst from the box. The air was instantly filled with the sweet, rich scent of plum blossoms, confirming the pill's authenticity. The 2 swordsmen were mesmerized by the glowing orb, their greed visible in their wide eyes. They were so distracted that they didn't notice the masked figure lurking just behind them. A sudden realization hit them as they sensed a third presence nearby. They looked up to find Jin So-eun staring right at them, his eyes crinkled in a mocking smile. "Who's there?" Gu Ilmu screamed, but the masked figure was already moving like a shadow. He dodged a wild swing, his movements fluid and unervingly fast. Before they could react, Jin So-eun held up the red box with a triumphant flourish. Gu Ilmu's jaw dropped in disbelief as he realized the prize had been snatched right from his hand. "Junior brother, catch that thief!" Gu Ilmu roared, pointing a trembling finger. Jang Hang didn't need to be told twice, drawing his sword and lunging forward. Jang Hang charged with a furious yell, swinging his blade through the air. He shouted about punishing anyone who dared to steal what he believed belonged to him. Jin So-eun turned and sprinted into the woods, throwing a sarcastic remark over his shoulder. He mocked their hypocrisy, calling them out for their own thievery. The pursuit was on, with the 2 swordsmen leaping through the trees in hot pursuit. Jin stayed just out of reach, reminding them that they were the ones who stole it first. Jang Hang pushed himself harder, closing the gap as he swung his heavy blade. He was determined to cut the masked intruder down and reclaim the elixir. With a sudden, agile jump, Jin So-eun cleared a fallen log and disappeared into the dense undergrowth. The swordsman followed blindly, fueled by rage and desperation. Jin glanced back one last time, a playful warning appearing in his mind. He told them to watch their step as they charged forward. A heavy metal trap, hidden beneath the leaves, snapped shut with a sickening crunch. The iron teeth bit deep into Jang Hang's leg, pinning him to the forest floor. Jang Hang's eyes bulged in pure agony as blood sprayed across the leaves. The sudden, violent shock left him gasping, unable to even scream. From his vantage point, Jin So-eun watched the scene unfold with cold satisfaction. He whispered jackpot to himself, his plan working even better than expected. Jang Hang gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled against the iron jaws. Every movement only made the teeth sink deeper into his mangled leg. A gut-wrenching scream finally tore through the quiet forest. The trap had done its job, turning a master swordsman into a wounded animal. Gu Ilmu skidded to a halt, looking back at his trapped junior brother in horror. Jin Soan stood nearby, casually watching as if he were merely an observer. Gu Ilmu snarled, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and fury. He cursed the masked man for resorting to such tricks instead of fighting like a proper swordsman. He pointed his sword at Jin Soan, his voice trembling with rage. He demanded the thief take off the mask and show his face. Jin Soan didn't bother reaching for a weapon, instead casually picking up a stone from the ground. He looked at Gu Ilmu with a calm, steady gaze. "You want me to tell you my name, my sect, and my master?" Jin Soan asked, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. He knew he held all the cards now. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the small stone toward Gu Ilmu's feet. It landed with a soft thud, a seemingly harmless gesture. Gu Ilmu's eyes widened as another massive trap erupted from the ground beneath him. The metal jaws slammed shut with a thunderous clang, sealing his fate alongside his brother. Gu Ilmu's face was a map of raw shock and agonizing pain. The reality that he'd been outplayed by a thief was finally starting to sink in. Jin Soan stood perfectly still in the middle of a literal minefield of iron traps, his dark cape whipping in the breeze. He declared himself the new owner of the snow plum pill, leaving the two murderers to rot. As he watched them struggle, his mind flickered back to how he'd put the pieces together. It all came down to one simple question: how did he know they were the ones who did it? He had spent hours digging through records, cross-referencing names like Ju Jangmok and Gu Ilmu. Something about the official alliance reports just didn't sit right with him. In his mind, shelves of ancient books and scrolls glowed with a ghostly red light as he searched. He looked for anyone who showed even a tiny, unexplained bump in their inner chi around that time. The memory of Ju Jangmok's disappearance was the smoking gun. The man was a legendary thief, but he'd vanished without a trace the exact moment the snow plum pill was stolen. Jin Soan calculated that if two people split the pill, their strength would increase subtly and at the exact same time. It was a pattern only someone with his total recall could ever hope to find. Back in reality, the two swordsmen were visibly shaking, their arrogance completely drained. They couldn't wrap their heads around how this masked stranger knew their names and their darkest secrets. Jin Soan turned his back on them, walking away with a casual, mocking gait. He confirmed that he knew them well, members of the prestigious Diensong sect's 5 swords. Gu Ilmu screamed after him, his voice cracking with pure desperation. He tried to hide behind the name of the Diensong sect and the Murim alliance, threatening brutal retaliation if he didn't stop. Jin Soan just glanced back over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and full of mockery behind his black mask. He asked since when a common robber had the right to report another robber to the law. Driven to a total breaking point, Jang Hangs ignored his mangled leg and lunged forward with a primal roar. He threw a heavy punch, determined to crush the man who had humiliated him. A dull thud echoed through the trees as his fist hit the dirt, but his target was already gone. He snarled, refusing to believe that such cheap tricks could actually stop someone of his caliber. Jin Soan moved like a shadow through the field, iron traps flying into the air as they were triggered by his passing. The entire forest floor was a mess of jagged metal, and he was the only one who knew the safe path. Jang Hang let out a mocking laugh as he completely neutralized all of the masked man's tricks. Dike Tiang On, Tanavan Nin Dong Trap Ma Min Tun Kart Dong Tien De Sam Kung Kong Koi Lan Long. Gu Ilmu and Jang Hang regrouped for a split second, their eyes burning with hatred. Gu Ilmu vowed that he would rip off the thief's mask and tear him limb from limb the moment he caught him. Jin Soan remained completely silent, his expression hidden behind the black cloth as he watched them from the shadows. He was just waiting for the right moment to lead them into his final trap. He turned and sprinted away again, his movements fast and precise. The two swordsmen didn't hesitate, diving back into the chase with their blades drawn and ready to kill. Gu Ilmu shouted for his brother to stay close as they headed toward a section of the forest covered in deep, fallen leaves. They knew this was likely where the most traps were hidden. The ground was a thick blanket of brown and green, making it impossible to see what was underneath. Footprints were the only thing they could use as a guide through the death trap. They jumped together, their bodies silhouetted against the bright, full moon as they cleared a wide gap in the brush. The only sound was the heavy thud of their boots and their ragged breathing. From an overhead view, it looked like a high-stakes game of follow the leader. The two swordsmen were desperate to close the distance, while Jin So-won stayed just one step ahead. Gu Ilmo watched the ground like a hawk, making sure to step exactly where his brother had already landed. He was certain that if one of them made it through, the path had to be safe. A twisted, arrogant smile spread across Gu Ilmo's face as he felt the solid ground beneath his feet. He laughed, taunting Jin So-won and claiming that his little tricks weren't working anymore. Jin So-won didn't say a word, continuing to weave through the trees with effortless grace. He was leading them through a maze they didn't even realize was a trap until it was too late. The two swordsmen were practically on top of him now, their faces contorted with murderous intent. They were absolutely sure this was where they would finally corner him. A heavy boot landed firmly on a pile of dry leaves. For one tiny second, there was nothing but the sound of leaves being crushed underfoot. Jin So-won's eye narrowed, a cold, sharp light reflecting in his pupil as he sensed the exact moment the trap was triggered. He had them right where he wanted them. Then came the sound that ended it all, a sharp, metallic click hidden beneath the foliage. The path they thought was safe was actually the heart of the trap field. Jin So-won looked back over his shoulder, a dark, satisfied intensity in his gaze. The game was finally over. A massive iron trap erupted from the ground, snapping shut on Jang Hang's leg with a bone-chilling crunch. Blood sprayed instantly, painting the surrounding leaves a deep, dark red. A violent burst of crimson covered the screen as the heavy metal teeth tore through muscle and bone. The agony was immediate and overwhelming. Both Gu Ilmo and Jang Hang were pinned to the forest floor, screaming in raw, unfiltered pain. Their expensive swords were forgotten in the dirt as they clutched at their mangled legs. Jin So-won walked back toward them, standing over his broken enemies with a cold, mocking expression. He complimented them on being a bit smarter than he thought, even if it didn't save them. He gestured toward the ground, where dozens of glowing blue outlines revealed the true scale of his preparation. The entire area was packed so densely with traps that there was almost no safe ground at all. He leaned in closer, his voice low as he explained the harsh truth. They had tried to follow his footsteps perfectly, but even a hair's difference was enough to trigger a trap in a field this dense. Gu Ilmo stared up at him in pure terror, his face pale and slick with cold sweat. He gasped that such precision was impossible for any human, especially in a place this crowded with traps. Jin So-won's gaze was piercing, his eyes glowing with the power of his total recall. He stood as the ultimate predator who had just finished a long, calculated game of cat and mouse. He reached for his sword, the cold metal glinting under the moonlight. He was ready to finish this and walk away with the prize he had worked so hard for. He explained that it wasn't about luck or magic, it was his memory. It was the only gift the heavens had ever truly given him, and he was going to make sure they remembered it. As the screams of the two men faded into the night, the only thing left in the air was the thick, metallic scent of blood. Jin So-won stood victorious, the snow plum pill finally his. High above the bustling streets of Hefei, the ornate eaves of a grand manor caught the bright midday sun. A voice echoed from within, questioning the current influence of the Taeyul sect. Inside a serene room, a man's hand gripped a warm cup of tea, steam rising into the air. He let out a low, contemplative hum as he considered the shifting political landscape of the martial world. Elder Namgung Taewon sat across from Jigul Sumyeon, the chief strategist of the Murim alliance, whose face was obscured by a long, translucent veil. They spoke of the 108 Peaks, the prestigious group of sects that served as the backbone of their alliance. Namgung Taewon wore a wide, unsettling smile as he confirmed Jigul Sumyeon's observations. He noted that while the old guard held their titles, several ambitious new sects had been rising rapidly within the city of Hefei. The two men sat in a sparsely furnished room, illuminated by the harsh light of a large circular window. Jigul Sumyeon casually suggested that perhaps the time had come to replace some of the aging peaks with more capable candidates. Jigul Sumyeon took a slow, measured sip of his tea, his eyes sharp and unreadable behind the veil. He pondered the rumors circulating within the alliance, wondering if the foundations of their order were as stable as they appeared. Namgung Taewon offered a teapot with a practiced, friendly gesture, asking if the rare tea leaves suited the strategist's refined taste.
Jigul Sumyeong remained silent, recalling reports that Namgung Taewon was secretly pulling the strings of the Iron Sword sect.
Jigul Sumyeong stared into the golden depths of his teacup, the surface rippling slightly.
He reminded the elder that a member of the 108 Peaks could not be cast aside without a legitimate and severe justification.
A bead of sweat formed on Namgung Taewon's forehead, though he kept his polite smile firmly in place. He asked if the strategist was implying that the Taeyul sect had committed some specific crime or negligence.
Jigul Sumyeong continued to drink in silence, letting the tension hang heavy in the air. Namgung Taewon took the opportunity to mention rumors that the Taeyul sect was allegedly abusing its special admission privileges for profit.
Jigul Sumyeong repeated the elder's words with a tone of mock surprise, his veiled head tilting slightly. He asked if he was truly suggesting that a sect of such standing would exploit its status for personal gain.
Namgung Taewon's grin stretched wider, turning into a predatory leer that reached his eyes.
He leaned forward, finishing the thought by asking if they were using those ancient privileges simply to satisfy their own insatiable greed. He leans in, his face contorting into a cunning, toothy grin as he speaks of satisfying greed through ancient privileges. Outside, a bird perches on a gnarled tree branch overlooking the tiled roofs of the quiet complex. The sinister official continues his oily speech while his guest, partially hidden behind a veiled hat, listens silently across the low table. He gestures wildly with his hands, acting out a facade of humility and misunderstood intentions. A sharp, calculating eye narrows for a brief moment, betraying the greed hidden behind his humble words. He slowly tilts a white teapot, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from the cups. The amber liquid flows steadily into the small green cup as the conversation turns to honoring the past.
Namgung Taewon offers the tea with a polite bow, though his expression remains sinister and deeply unsettling.
Cut to an inn late at night, where a lone figure sits slumped over a wooden table in the dim courtyard.
Jin Soan is deep in a trance, his eyes squeezed shut as a blue aura flickers around his face. The young man sits shirtless in the dark room, intense blue chi radiating from his muscular back like a cooling flame. Sweat pours down his jaw as he pushes himself through the final, agonizing stage of his cultivation session. One eye snaps open, glowing with a fierce, ethereal blue light as the energy finally peaks. He sits peacefully in the center of the room as the turbulent aura begins to settle into his core. The martial artist clenches his fist, feeling the weight of 30 years' worth of internal energy pulsing through his veins. He stands up with a triumphant, manic grin. He's already surpassed the power he had at the peak of his previous life. Jin Soan heads down the stairs, his boots thudding loudly against the wooden steps in the quiet inn. He starts throwing on his outer robes, calling out to wake whoever is currently on duty in the main hall. The server boy, an energetic kid with his brown hair tied in two buns, nearly falls off a table in shock. The young master takes a seat and asks for anything edible, his hunger finally catching up to him after days of meditation. The boy is stunned, stammering that the kitchen has already been closed for the night. Jin Soan just laughs and slams a heavy stack of silver coins onto the table with a confident smirk. The sight of all that money immediately changes the boy's tune, and he sprints toward the kitchen to wake the chef. As he waits, he recalls how he secured those funds by using his bracelet to drain the life force from a massive tiger. Dark, swirling energy emanates from the azure dragon bracelet on his wrist as it processes the life force it stole. The young master managed to skin the beasts afterward, turning his training session into a massive profit. A flashback shows him barging into a shop, gleefully tossing a pile of premium tiger pelts onto the counter. Back in the present, he rests his chin on his hands, a shadow of worry finally crossing his face. He remembers how the bracelet looked when it was ruthlessly draining the giant spider in the cave. The memory of the tiger's dying roar flickers in his mind, making him realize the scale of the power he now holds. Jin Soan knows that if anyone sees him use this power, they might mistake it for some forbidden demonic art. He grips the fabric of his sleeve, knowing his bracelet's power looks exactly like the notorious heaven-devouring art. If the Murim Alliance catches wind of this, his head won't be the only one on the line, his whole sect would be in danger. The young master's thoughts are cut short as the boy returns, balancing multiple trays of steaming food. The aroma is enough to snap him out of it, and he turns into a total glutton at the sight of the unexpected feast. The martial artist starts inhaling the noodles like he hasn't eaten in weeks, ignoring the kid hanging around the table. The server boy leans in close, asking if he's heard the latest rumors going around the city lately. He mentions that a precious spiritual elixir was recently stolen right out from under the Jiryang Merchant Guild's nose. Jin So-won freezes mid-bite as the kid excitedly describes how the thief pulled off the heist during a crowded banquet. The boy adds that the Murim alliance is so embarrassed they've already dispatched an elite investigation team to find the culprit. He nearly chokes, coughing and spitting out food as he realizes just how quickly the heat is closing in on him. Server boy leans in, offering a cup of water while asking the young master if he's alright after choking on his meal. Jin So-won waves him off, quickly regaining his composure to ask if the Murim alliance found any evidence during their search. His heart races as he stares wide-eyed, terrified that his heist might have actually put an innocent person behind bars. He knows that since he's the real thief, any arrest made by the alliance would be a total miscarriage of justice. The server boy explains that the trail went cold almost immediately, leaving the investigation team with absolutely nothing to go on. The young master lets out a massive sigh of relief before quickly masking it with a fake pained expression, pretending to feel sorry for the guild's loss. The chatter continues as the server mentions another massive banquet that's about to be held nearby in the city of Hefei. The young man's expression instantly turns grim as he hears the specific name of the group hosting the upcoming event. It's the Iron Sword sect, and they're throwing a 7-day feast to celebrate their leader's 60th birthday. He realizes with a sinking feeling that the timing perfectly matches the most shameful day from his original life. In a red-tinted memory of the past, Jin So-won's father, a man with messy black hair, is forced to kneel in a pool of his own blood. Looking down on him is the Iron Sword sect leader, an arrogant elder with a thick white beard and a mocking, cruel smile. His father's face is pressed against the floor, his teeth bared in a mix of physical agony and absolute humiliation. The scene was a public spectacle of shame, with his father forced to bow before a massive crowd of mocking witnesses. He had to swallow his pride and offer a groveling apology directly to the man who was systematically crushing him. Jin So-won watches his broken father from the side, knowing that every drop of blood spilled that day was his own fault. Back in the present, he clenches his fist so hard his knuckles turn white, the memory still burning in his mind. The young master stares into the distance, resolving that this time around, he'll avoid going near that place at all costs. He stands up so abruptly that he startles the boy, whose expression shifts from confusion to worry. He begins to walk away, his steps heavy with the weight of a decision he never thought he'd have to face again. The young man steps through a doorway and into a blinding white light, the transition between intent and reality blurring into a sudden flash. Suddenly, he's thrust into a life-or-death duel against the Iron Sword sect leader's grandson, a muscular warrior with wild maroon hair. The grandson brings down a massive rectangular greatsword with enough force to shatter the earth and send debris flying in every direction. Mid-air and clashing steel, Jin So-won struggles to process how he ended up in a duel with the sect leader's grandson so suddenly.